The morning mist clung to the valley like a shroud of secrets. Elowen stood at the edge of the cliff, her dark hair whipping in the wind that carried the scent of pine and approaching danger. Below her, spreading across the meadow like a shadow come to life, was the largest wolf army the Eastern Territories had ever seen. 3,000 strong, their eyes glowed amber in the dim light, their breath rising in clouds of steam. At the center of this living tide of fur and fang sat Draeven, the Alpha King. Even from this distance, Elowen could feel the weight of his presence. He was massive, his silver coat marked with the scars of 100 battles, his eyes the color of winter ice. Around his neck hung the ancient collar of his lineage, forged from the bones of the first wolves who walked upright, who learned to speak, who built kingdoms in the shadow of the mountains. Elowen's hands trembled, but not from fear. The leather satchel at her side pulsed with a heat that seemed to come from within, as if the contents were alive and waiting. She had traveled for 3 weeks to reach this place, following rumors and whispers, piecing together fragments of old songs and older warnings. The wolves had come for her village. They claimed the land belonged to them by right of ancient treaty, signed in blood when the world was young and humans still feared the dark. Draeven had sent word a month ago. Surrender the territory or face extinction. Simple. Final. But Elowen had found something in the ruins of the old temple, something the wolves thought lost forever. Something that could end them all. She cupped her hands around her mouth and called down to the valley, her voice carrying on the wind with a strength that surprised even her. Draeven, Alpha King of the Northern Packs. I would speak with you. The effect was immediate. Thousands of wolves turned as one, their eyes finding her small figure against the sky. A ripple of growls moved through the army like thunder rolling across distant hills. She saw wolves rise on their hind legs, their forms shifting, bones cracking and reforming until they stood as tall as men, though wilder, more dangerous. Warriors in wolf skin, ready to tear her apart for her audacity. But Draeven raised one massive paw, and silence fell like a blade. He stood, and Elowen's breath caught despite herself. Even in his full wolf form, he towered over his warriors. When he spoke, his voice was deep enough to rattle stones. You dare interrupt my march, human? You dare shout demands at me like I am some common beast? I dare far more than that, Elowen called back. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small glass vial, holding it high where the morning sun could catch it. The liquid inside glowed like captured moonlight, silver and pure and deadly. I hold in my hand the tears of Fenrith. Do you know what that means, Alpha King? The valley went deathly still. Elowen saw wolves backing away from each other, saw Draeven's ears flatten against his skull. Good. He knew. They all knew. That's impossible, Draeven snarled, but there was something new in his voice. Uncertainty. The tears were destroyed 1,000 years ago. The temple was burned. The priests were... The priests hid one vial, Elowen interrupted. They buried it deep, beneath layers of stone and spell, and they left clues for those desperate enough to seek it. I am that desperate, Draeven. My people are that desperate. She uncorked the vial, and even from this distance, she saw wolves flinch at the scent. The tears of Fenrith, named for the first wolf who betrayed his own kind, who tried to poison the wellspring from which all wolf magic flowed. One drop in water and it spread like disease. One drop in soil and nothing would grow for a generation. One drop in the blood of a wolf and they would die screaming, their power turning against them, eating them from the inside. You have 1 minute, Elowen said, her voice steady now, cold as the winter that was coming. Call off your army. Turn back from my village, from my people. Or I will empty this vial into the river below us, the same river that feeds into the sacred pools of your homeland. I will poison your source, Draeven. I will end every wolf in the northern packs and salt the earth so that your children's children will be born twisted and dying. You wouldn't dare, Draeven said, but he was already moving, his massive form beginning the climb up the cliff face with a speed that defied nature. You would be a monster. You would be worse than anything you accuse us of. I would be what you made me, Elowen replied. She held the vial over the edge, tilting it just enough that a single silver drop trembled at the rim. 40 seconds. Around Draeven, his wolves were howling, a sound of rage and fear mixed together. Some were calling for her death, others begging their king to retreat. But Draeven kept climbing, his claws digging into stone, his eyes locked on Elowen with an intensity that would have broken a lesser person. Why, he roared. Why fight so hard for one village? We could give you new lands, safe passage to the southern territories. We could. That village is my home, Elowen said simply. Those people are my family. My mother is buried in the soil you want to claim. My father built his forge there, and his father before him. We have lived in that valley for 12 generations, long before your kind learned to walk upright. You have no right to it, treaty or no treaty. 20 seconds. Draeven was closer now, close enough that she could see the individual scars on his muzzle, the ancient wisdom and terrible power in his eyes. He was beautiful in the way that storms are beautiful, in the way that avalanches are beautiful. Deadly and magnificent and utterly without mercy. If you do this, he said, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, you will start a war that will consume everything. Not just wolves. Not just humans. Everything. The old treaties will shatter. The balance will break. Is that what you want? Is that worth your village? Elowen felt tears on her cheeks, but her hand remained steady. 10 seconds. Please, Draeven said, and there was something raw in that word, something that sounded almost human. Please don't make me choose between my pride and my people. Then choose your people, Elowen whispered. Choose life over conquest. Choose mercy over tradition. 5 seconds. Draeven reached the top of the cliff. He was so close now that Elowen could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the wild scent of forest and blood and ancient magic. His eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. 3 seconds, Elowen said. Draeven threw back his head and howled, a sound so loud and long that it seemed to shake the mountains themselves. Below in the valley, 3,000 wolves answered, their voices joining him in a chorus that spoke of defeat and fury and something else, something that might have been respected. When the howling finally died away, Draeven's form began to shift. Bones cracked, fur receded, and where the massive wolf had stood, there was now a man. Tall and scarred, his hair silver as his coat had been, his eyes still that same winter ice. He wore simple leather armor, marked with the symbols of his rank, and when he spoke, his voice was hoarse. We will withdraw, he said. Your village is safe. But know this, Elowen of the Eastern Valley. This is not finished. You have bought your people time, but you have also made yourself a legend. Stories will be told of this day, of the woman who held poison over the sacred river and made an alpha king beg. And legends have a way of shaping the future in ways we cannot predict. Elowen carefully recorked the vial and returned it to her satchel. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. I don't want to be a legend, she said quietly. I just want my people to be safe. Then you should have been born in a simpler time, Draeven replied. He turned to look down at his army, at the thousands of wolves who had followed him across mountains and rivers, trusting in his leadership. Fall back, he roared. We return to the northern lands. The eastern territories remain unclaimed. A murmur of confusion and anger rippled through the army below, but they obeyed. Slowly, like a tide receding, the wolves began to move away from the valley, heading back toward the mountain passes that would take them home. Draeven looked at Elowen one more time. I will remember this, he said. And I think, whether you want it or not, we will meet again. Then he leaped from the cliff, his form shifting mid-air back into the massive silver wolf, landing among his warriors with a grace that seemed to defy all laws of nature. Within minutes, the valley was emptying, the great wolf army retreating like a bad dream fading in the morning light. Elowen stood alone on the cliff, watching them go. She should have felt triumphant. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt hollow, as if she had just set in motion something vast and terrible that would ripple out across the years. She looked down at her satchel, at the vial of silver liquid that had saved her people but might have doomed them all in ways she couldn't yet see. The tears of Fenrith. She had lied to Draeven about one thing. The priests hadn't hidden just one vial. They had hidden 3. And she had just used the only bargaining chip she would ever have. As the last of the wolves disappeared into the mountain mist, Elowen turned and began the long walk home, unaware that in the valley behind her, one wolf remained. A young scout, barely more than a pup, watching her with eyes that held a wisdom beyond his years. He had heard every word. He had seen everything. And he had questions that would not be easily answered. Before we continue, kindly subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The celebration in the village lasted 3 days. When Elowen returned with news that the wolf army had retreated, that their homes and families were safe, the people reacted with joy that bordered on madness. They lit bonfires that could be seen for miles, they danced until their feet bled, they sang songs of victory until their voices gave out. But Elowen did not celebrate. She sat in her small cottage at the edge of the village, staring at the remaining 2 vials of tears of Fenrith, and tried to understand what she had done. Her friend Kasha found her there on the morning of the 4th day. Kasha was small and quick, with hands stained permanently green from her work with herbs and healing plants. She had known Elowen since they were children, running wild through the forests before the wolves came, before everything changed. The elders want to see you, Kasha said, settling onto the bench beside Elowen. They want to throw you a feast, name you protector of the valley, build a statue in the square. I don't want any of that, Elowen said tiredly. I know, Kasha replied. She looked at the vials on the table, her expression troubled. Tell me the truth. Would you have really done it? Would you have poisoned the river? Elowen was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she finally admitted. In that moment, standing on the cliff with 3,000 wolves below me and my mother's grave behind me, I honestly don't know what I would have done. I think that's what scared Draeven. Not the poison, but the fact that he couldn't tell if I was bluffing. That makes you dangerous, Kasha said softly. More dangerous than the poison, maybe. I know. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the village slowly returning to normal. Children playing, hammers ringing as the blacksmiths returned to their forges, the low murmur of market day business. There's something else, Kasha said eventually. Travelers came through yesterday from the northern territories. They're saying the wolves are in chaos. Some packs are calling for Draeven's head, saying he showed weakness, that an alpha king who bows to human threats isn't fit to lead. Others are defending him, saying he chose wisdom over pride. The wolf kingdom is splitting, Elowen. Because of what you did. Elowen closed her eyes. I was afraid of that. There's more. The travelers say there's a young wolf, barely grown, who's been asking questions about you. Seeking out anyone who knows your name, your history. He's telling a strange story about ancient temples and hidden priests and poison that could end the wolf race. Elowen's hand went to her satchel instinctively. Did they say his name? Corinne, Kasha replied. They say he's from one of the oldest bloodlines, but he's always been different. Curious about humans, asking questions that make the elders uncomfortable. Now he's apparently obsessed with you. Wonderful, Elowen muttered. That's exactly what I need. A curious wolf is investigating me. But before either of them could say more, a commotion rose from the village square. Shouts, the sound of something heavy hitting the ground, a woman's scream cut short. Elowen and Kasha ran outside to find the entire village gathered in a circle, staring at something in the center of the square. As Elowen pushed through the crowd, her heart sank. There, in the middle of their village, stood a young wolf in human form. He was tall and lean, with sandy fur that translated to golden brown hair in his human shape. His eyes were amber, bright with intelligence and something else. Defiance, maybe. Or determination. He wore simple traveling clothes and carried no weapons, but his presence alone was enough to send ripples of fear through the crowd. I am Corinne, he announced, his voice carrying across the square. I come in peace, bearing a message for the one called Elowen. The crowd parted, pushing Elowen forward whether she wanted to go or not. She found herself face to face with the young wolf, close enough to see the nervous energy in his stance, the way his fingers twitched as if he wanted to shift forms and run. I am Elowen, she said quietly. You're either very brave or very foolish to come here alone. Perhaps both, Corinne admitted. A slight smile flickered across his face. I have questions. About what happened at the cliff. About the tears of Fenrith. About why you would risk your own soul to threaten creatures you've never met. I don't owe you answers, Elowen said, though her tone was more curious than angry. No, Corinne agreed. But I think you want to give them anyway. I saw something in your eyes that day, when you stood against my king. You were terrified. Not of dying, but of what you might have to do. That kind of fear interests me. Around them, the villagers muttered angrily. Someone threw a stone that bounced off Corinne's shoulder. He didn't even flinch. Enough. Elowen commanded, her voice sharp. The crowd fell silent, surprised by her authority. She had never been a leader before, had always been content to work her small garden, keep her head down, and live a quiet life. But that life was gone now, burned away in 60 seconds on a cliff top. She looked at Corinne, really looked at him, and saw something unexpected. He reminded her of herself before all this, curious and questioning and not quite fitting into the world he'd been born into. Come with me, she said finally. We'll talk. But if this is a trap, if there are more wolves waiting beyond the village. There aren't, Corinne interrupted. I came alone. Against orders, actually. Draeven forbade anyone from seeking you out. He said you were to be left in peace, that the matter was closed. But I can't just let it be closed. Not when there are so many questions. Elowen led him back to her cottage, ignoring the frightened and angry looks from her neighbors. Kasha followed, positioning herself near the door like a guardian, her hand resting on the knife at her belt. Inside, Corinne looked around with unconcealed interest. His eyes lingered on the herbs hanging from the rafters, the books stacked in precarious towers, the small shrine to Elowen's parents in the corner. "You live alone," he observed. "Yes." "By choice? Does it matter?" Corinne shrugged. "Everything matters when you're trying to understand someone. You stood against an entire army alone. You live alone. You seem comfortable with solitude in a way that most humans aren't. I wonder if that's what gave you the strength to do what you did." Elowen sat down heavily. "What do you want, Corinne?" He settled onto the floor, folding his long legs beneath him in a way that was distinctly wolf-like even in human form. "I want to understand why the priests hid the tears of Fenrith instead of destroying them. I want to know how you found them when our own historians have searched for centuries. I want to know if you have more. And I want to know what you plan to do with them." "That's a lot of wants," Elowen said dryly. "I'm a curious creature," Corinne replied with that slight smile again. "It's gotten me in trouble before." Elowen studied him for a long moment, weighing her options. She could lie. She could throw him out. She could call for help and have the villagers drive him away. But something in his open, honest face made her hesitate. "The priests didn't destroy the tears because they believed in balance," she said finally. "They believed that absolute power in any form was dangerous. They hid the vials as a safeguard, a last resort if wolves or humans ever became too powerful, too cruel. They left clues for the desperate, for those who had no other choice." "And you were desperate," Corinne said softly. "My people were going to die," Elowen replied. "What would you have done?" "I don't know," Corinne admitted. "That's what troubles me. I want to say I would have found another way, a peaceful solution. But when I imagine my own family threatened, my own home about to be destroyed, I think I would do terrible things to protect them. Maybe we're not so different, humans and wolves." "We're very different," Kasha interjected from the doorway. "You can tear us apart with your bare hands. You have magic in your blood. You live 3 times as long as we do and you heal from wounds that would kill us. Don't pretend we're equals." "You're right," Corinne said, surprising them both. "We're not equals. We're stronger, faster, more durable. Which makes Elowen's victory all the more remarkable. She found the one weapon that could level the field, and she used it without hesitation. That takes a kind of courage we wolves don't often see in humans." "Or a kind of madness," Elowen muttered. "Those two things are often the same," Corinne replied. He leaned forward, his amber eyes intense. "I need to tell you something, Elowen. Something that's not common knowledge outside the wolf territories. Draeven is losing his grip on power. By retreating, by honoring your threat, he's created a split in the packs. The traditionalists think he's gone soft. They're gathering support for a challenge to his rule." "That's not my problem," Elowen said, though her stomach tightened with guilt. "It is, though," Corinne insisted. "If Draeven falls, the wolf who takes his place won't be someone who values wisdom over strength. It'll be someone like Gareth, who leads the traditionalist faction. And Gareth's first act as Alpha King will be to march on your village with twice the army Draeven brought. He won't give you a chance to threaten him. He'll slaughter everyone, burn everything, and salt the earth so thoroughly that nothing will ever grow here again." The cottage fell silent. Outside, Elowen could hear the sounds of her village, the life that she'd fought so hard to preserve. Children laughing. Someone singing. The simple, precious sound of people living without fear. "What are you asking me to do?" she said finally. "I don't know yet," Corinne admitted. "But I think we need each other. You have the tears, which means you have leverage. I have information about wolf politics, knowledge of their ways. Together, maybe we can find a solution that doesn't end with one of our peoples extinct." "You're asking me to trust you," Elowen said. "A wolf." "Yes," Corinne replied simply. "I'm asking you to trust me. Just as I'm trusting you not to use that poison on me right now, even though I'm sitting in your home, completely vulnerable." Elowen looked at Kasha, who shook her head in warning. Then she looked at the vials on her table, gleaming silver in the afternoon light. Finally, she looked at Corinne, at his open, earnest face, and made a decision that would change everything. "Tell me about this, Gareth," she said. "Tell me everything." And so Corinne began to talk, his words painting a picture of a wolf kingdom in turmoil, of ancient grudges and modern ambitions, of a world on the brink of a war that would consume everything in its path. As Elowen listened, she realized that her moment on the clifftop hadn't ended anything. It had only been the beginning. 3 weeks after Corinne's arrival in the village, Elowen found herself doing something she never thought possible. She was traveling north, toward the very heart of wolf territory, with a young wolf as her guide and only 2 vials of poison as her protection. Kasha had begged her not to go. The village elders had forbidden it. But Elowen had seen the truth in Corinne's eyes. If Gareth succeeded in overthrowing Draeven, her people would die. All of them. The peace she'd won would be shattered like glass, and she would have accomplished nothing except buying a few extra weeks of life. So she packed light, hid the vials carefully, and followed Corinne into the wilderness before dawn, leaving only a note for Kasha that explained nothing and apologized for everything. The journey took 5 days of hard travel. Corinne moved through the forest with an ease that Elowen envied, his senses alert to every sound and smell. He taught her how to step quietly, how to read the signs that other wolves had passed nearby, and how to avoid the territories of the more aggressive packs. On the 3rd night, as they sat by a small fire in a cave that Corinne swore was safe, Elowen finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Why are you helping me? What's in this for you?" Corinne poked at the fire with a stick, his expression thoughtful. "Do you know what it's like to be born into a world where everyone expects you to be a certain way? Where the path of your life is laid out before you walk even a single step?" "No," Elowen admitted. "I was born to choose my own way." "Lucky you," Corinne said with a hint of bitterness. "I was born into the Stormclaw pack, one of the oldest and most traditional lines. My father was an advisor to Draeven's father. My grandfather fought in the Blood Moon Wars. I was supposed to follow in their footsteps, become a warrior, maybe even challenge for a position on the Alpha Council. But I never wanted that. I wanted to understand things, to learn, to question." "So you're a rebel," Elowen said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I suppose I am," Corinne agreed. "And when I saw you on that cliff, threatening everything my people hold sacred, not with an army but with knowledge and courage and sheer determination, I realized something. The old ways are dying. They have to die, or they'll kill us all. Gareth represents everything that's wrong with wolf culture. The violence, the pride, the refusal to adapt. If he becomes Alpha King, it won't just be your village that suffers. It'll be every pack that doesn't fall in line with his vision. He'll drag us back to the darkest days of our history." "And Draeven?" "Draeven is better," Corinne said carefully. But he's also limited by tradition. He made the right choice on the cliff, but he did it for the wrong reasons. He retreated because you scared him, not because he genuinely believed in coexistence. If we're going to build a lasting peace, we need more than fear. We need understanding. That's a nice dream, Elowen said. But dreams don't stop warriors with teeth and claws. No, Corinne agreed. But maybe they can inspire those warriors to choose a different path. They reached the northern capital on the afternoon of the 5th day. Elowen had expected something primitive, rough structures built of wood and stone. Instead, she found a city that rivaled anything in the human kingdoms. Buildings rose 3 and 4 stories high, carved from pale granite that glowed in the sunlight. Streets were paved with smooth stones, and everywhere she looked, wolves in both human and animal form moved with purpose and grace. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "We're not the barbarians you thought we were, then?" Corinne asked with amusement. "I never thought that," Elowen protested, though her cheeks colored slightly. "I just didn't expect this." Corinne led her through side streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares where they might attract attention. A human in the wolf capital was rare enough to be noteworthy, dangerous enough to be reported. They made their way to a small house on the outskirts of the city, where Corinne knocked 3 times in a specific pattern. The door opened to reveal an elderly wolf in human form, her hair white as snow, her eyes still sharp and bright. "Corinne," she said warmly. "You young fool. Do you know the entire council is looking for you?" "Hello, Grandmother Thessa," Corinne said, kissing her cheek. "I brought someone who needs to speak with the Alpha King." The old wolf's eyes shifted to Elowen, and understanding dawned immediately. "The Cliff Girl," she said. "The Poison Keeper." "Child, you either have more courage than sense or you're completely mad." "Probably both," Elowen admitted. Grandmother Thessa laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "I like her. Come in, quickly. The streets have eyes, and not all of them are friendly." Inside, the house was warm and cluttered with books, maps, and strange artifacts that Elowen couldn't identify. Grandmother Thessa settled them at a worn wooden table and served hot tea that tasted of mint and moonlight. "Draeven won't see you," she said bluntly. "He's under constant pressure from the traditionalists. Meeting with you would be seen as further weakness. Gareth's faction is already calling for a formal challenge. If Draeven shows any more favor to humans, he'll lose the support of the moderate packs as well." "Then we need another way," Corinne said. "What about the Council of Elders? They have the power to mediate challenges, don't they?" "In theory," Grandmother Thessa said. "But in practice, the Council follows strength. Right now, Gareth appears stronger because he's more willing to use violence. He's also been making alliances with the southern packs, promising them territory and power if they support his claim. What if we could prove that Gareth's way would lead to disaster?" Elowen asked. "What if we could show the Council that peace with humans is not weakness but survival?" Grandmother Thessa looked at her with new interest. "Go on." "The world is changing," Elowen said, the words coming faster now as the idea took shape. "Humans are building new cities, developing new technologies. We're not the scattered tribes we were 1,000 years ago when your treaties were written. If wolves go to war with us, it won't be a quick conquest. It'll be a grinding, terrible conflict that could last generations. Neither side would win. Both would be destroyed." "That's a bleak picture," Grandmother Thessa observed. "It's a realistic one," Elowen countered. "But there's another path. Trade. Exchange of knowledge. Cooperation. Wolves have magic and strength. Humans have innovation and adaptability. Together, we could build something neither of us could achieve alone. You're talking about integration, Corinne said, his eyes wide. Mixing of our peoples. I'm talking about coexistence, Elowen corrected. We don't have to become one people. We just have to stop trying to destroy each other. Grandmother Thessa was quiet for a long moment, sipping her tea. It's a beautiful idea, she finally said. But ideas don't survive in the arena where challenges are decided. Gareth will call for trial by combat. Draeven will have to fight him, and if Draeven loses, all your pretty words will mean nothing. Then Draeven can't lose, Elowen said simply. He's older than Gareth, Grandmother Thessa said gently. More experienced, yes. But also slower. Tired. He's been Alpha King for 30 years. Gareth is young, hungry, and absolutely ruthless. The odds aren't in Draeven's favor. Elowen stood abruptly, pacing the small room. Her mind raced, sorting through possibilities, discarding options. Finally, she stopped and looked at Corinne. What if we changed the nature of the challenge, she asked. What if we made it about more than just physical strength? The laws of challenge are ancient, Corinne said doubtfully. They've been the same for 1,000 years. But who decides the format? Elowen pressed. Who sets the terms? The Council of Elders, Grandmother Thessa said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. If we could convince them to modify the challenge, to include tests of wisdom and leadership in addition to combat, Draeven's chances would improve significantly. More than that, Elowen said, her words coming faster now. We make it a trial of the future. Not just a fight between two wolves, but a demonstration of which vision for wolf society is stronger. Gareth's way, the old way, all violence and tradition. Or Draeven's way, adaptation and growth. You want to turn a challenge into a debate, Corinne said, grinning now. That's brilliant. It's risky, Grandmother Thessa warned. The traditionalists will scream that we're perverting ancient law. Some might even refuse to accept the results. They'll refuse to accept any results that don't favor Gareth, Elowen pointed out. At least this way, Draeven has a fighting chance. We'd need support from the moderate packs, Grandmother Thessa mused. And from some of the elders. It won't be easy. Nothing about this is easy, Elowen said. But it's necessary. Because the alternative is a war that neither of our peoples can afford. They talked long into the night, planning and plotting, considering every angle. By the time dawn light began to seep through the windows, they had the outline of a plan. It was audacious, probably foolish, and almost certainly doomed to fail. But it was a chance. And sometimes, a chance is all you need. The Council of Elders met in a chamber carved from living stone, deep beneath the northern capital. 12 wolves, the oldest and wisest of all the packs, gathered in a circle around a fire that had burned continuously for 300 years. This was where the most important decisions of wolf society were made, where challenges were judged, where the future was decided. Elowen had never felt smaller than she did walking into that chamber, flanked by Corinne on one side and Grandmother Thessa on the other. 12 pairs of ancient eyes turned to examine her, and she felt the weight of their scrutiny like a physical force. This is unprecedented, rumbled a massive wolf with a coat the color of midnight. A human before the council. In all my years, I have never seen such a thing. These are unprecedented times, Elder Blackmane, Grandmother Thessa replied calmly. This human stood against our greatest army and made even the Alpha King pause. She deserves to be heard. She deserves to be punished, snarled a smaller wolf, his red fur bristling with anger. She threatened to poison our sacred waters. She should be executed as an example. Elder Redclaw, Corinne spoke, his voice respectful but firm. If you execute her, you'll start the very war that Gareth is pushing for. Her people will see it as an act of aggression. They'll retaliate. And the tears of Fenrith will be used, not as a threat, but as a weapon. The council chamber fell silent. Elowen could hear the crackling of the ancient fire, the soft breathing of the elders, the pounding of her own heart. Finally, an elderly female wolf with silver streaked through her brown coat spoke. Let the human speak. I would hear what brings her to our doorstep, uninvited and unannounced. Elowen took a deep breath, stepping forward into the circle. She had rehearsed this speech 100 times with Corinne and Grandmother Thessa, but now that the moment had arrived, all those careful words fled her mind. She was left with only the truth. Honored elders, she began, her voice stronger than she felt. I come before you not as an enemy, but as someone who seeks to prevent a catastrophe. Gareth plans to challenge Alpha King Draeven for leadership. If he wins through combat alone, he will lead your people down a path of endless war. My village will be destroyed first, yes. But it won't stop there. Gareth's vision requires conquest, expansion, the subjugation of all human territories in the eastern lands. And humans will not simply bow down and accept this. Nor should they, Elder Blackmane said surprisingly. But what concern is this to the council? Challenges are decided by strength. This is our way. Your way is killing you, Elowen said bluntly. Several elders growled at her audacity, but she pressed on. The world has changed. Humans have changed. We're not the prey we once were. We have weapons now, strategies, alliances. A war between our peoples would devastate both sides. There would be no winners, only survivors picking through the ashes. She speaks the truth, Grandmother Thessa interjected. I have lived long enough to remember the Blood Moon Wars. 40 years of fighting that accomplished nothing except filling graves on both sides. Do we really want to return to those dark days? What alternative do you propose? Asked the silver-streaked elder. Draeven has already shown weakness by retreating from this human's threat. If we do not accept the challenge, we appear even weaker. I propose changing the nature of the challenge itself, Elowen said. Let Gareth and Draeven compete not just in combat, but in wisdom. In leadership. In their vision for the future of the Wolf Nation. Let the council judge which path is truly stronger, war or peace, tradition or adaptation. The chamber erupted in argument. Some elders saw the wisdom in Elowen's words. Others saw only blasphemy, a corruption of ancient law. The debate raged for hours, wolves shifting between human and animal forms as emotions ran high. It was Elder Blackmane who finally brought order back to the chamber. Enough, he roared, his voice echoing off the stone walls. We will vote. Those in favor of modifying the challenge to include tests of wisdom and leadership in addition to combat, show your mark. Slowly, hesitantly, 6 elders stepped forward, placing their paws on the ancient voting stone. 6 out of 12. A perfect split. The vote is tied, Elder Blackmane announced. In such cases, tradition dictates that the Alpha King himself must cast the deciding vote. Then summon him, Grandmother Thessa said. Let Draeven speak for himself. A young wolf was sent to fetch the Alpha King, and the council waited in tense silence. Elowen felt Corinne's hand brush against hers, a small gesture of support that gave her strength. When Draeven finally entered the chamber, Elowen was struck again by his presence. Even in human form, scarred and weary, he carried himself with the dignity of someone born to lead. His winter ice eyes found Elowen immediately, and something flickered in them. Recognition. Respect. And perhaps a hint of amusement. Elowen of the Eastern Valley, he said, his deep voice filling the chamber. You continue to surprise me. I thought our business was concluded on that cliff top. So did I, Elowen admitted. But it seems the consequences of that day are still unfolding. Draeven turned to the council. I understand there is a vote. That my voice is needed to break a tie. The human proposes we change the traditional challenge, Elder Redclaw said with barely concealed contempt. She wants to make it about more than strength, more than combat. She wants to turn it into some kind of philosophical debate. I want to make it about leadership, Elowen corrected. About which vision for your people is truly stronger. Isn't that what an Alpha King should be? Not just the best fighter, but the best leader? Draeven studied her for a long moment. You realize that by suggesting this, you're trying to save my life. Gareth is younger, faster. In pure combat, my chances are not good. I realize that, Elowen said. But I'm not doing this to save you specifically. I'm doing it to save both our peoples from a war neither can win. Honest, at least, Draeven murmured. He turned to face the council, squaring his shoulders. I have been Alpha King for 30 years. In that time, I have led our people through drought and plenty, through war and peace. I have made decisions that saved lives and decisions that cost them. And I have learned one fundamental truth, strength alone is never enough. A leader must be wise. Must be adaptable. Must be willing to make hard choices that others cannot understand. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer but no less powerful. When I stood on that cliff top and heard Elowen's ultimatum, I had a choice. I could have called her bluff, ordered my army to attack, and likely destroyed her village. But at what cost? How many of my warriors would have died if she truly had the poison? How many more would have died in the wars that followed? So yes, I chose to retreat. And some call that weakness. But I call it wisdom. You validate the human's cowardice, Elder Redclaw spat. You legitimize threats and extortion. I acknowledge reality, Draeven shot back. And the reality is that we cannot rule through fear and violence alone. Not anymore. The world is changing, and we must change with it or be left behind, isolated and eventually extinct. So you vote to change the challenge? Elder Blackmane asked. I do, Draeven said firmly. Let Gareth and I compete in 3 trials. Combat, yes, but also wisdom and vision. Let the council and our people see which of us truly deserves to lead. Then it is decided, Elder Blackmane announced. 7 votes in favor. The challenge will be modified. Gareth will be summoned and informed of the terms. The council chamber emptied slowly, elders departing in small groups, their conversations hushed and urgent. Elowen found herself alone with Draeven, Corinne having been pulled aside by Grandmother Thessa. You're taking a great risk, Draeven said quietly. If I lose, Gareth will come for you first. He won't just destroy your village. He'll make an example of you, something so terrible that no human will ever dare threaten a wolf again. I know, Elowen said. But I couldn't just sit in my village and wait for war to come. I had to try. Why? Draeven asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Why risk so much for people who aren't even your own kind? Because they will be if we don't stop this, Elowen said. If war comes, it won't just be wolves and humans dying. It'll be the future dying. The possibility of something better than what we have now. I've seen what hatred does, what fear does. My parents died in a border skirmish when I was young, killed by wolves who thought humans were encroaching on their territory. I could have let that make me bitter, could have spent my life seeking revenge. But what would that accomplish? Just more death, more pain, more children growing up without parents. Draeven was quiet for a long moment. You're either the wisest human I've ever met or the most naive. I haven't decided which. Can't I be both? Elowen asked with a slight smile. To her surprise, Draeven laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. Perhaps. Time will tell. He turned serious again. The first trial is in 3 days. Combat. I need to prepare, and frankly, my chances are not good. Gareth is in his prime, and I am past mine. Then we need to change the rules of engagement, Elowen said. Make it about strategy rather than raw strength. Easier said than done, Draeven replied. But I'm listening. They talked long into the evening, Elowen sharing ideas, Draeven considering each one carefully. By the time they parted, a plan was taking shape. It was risky, unorthodox, and might get them both killed. But it was their only chance. The arena was carved from a natural amphitheater in the mountains, stones smoothed by thousands of years of wind and water. Wolves from every pack in the northern territories had gathered to witness the challenge, their bodies filling every available space, their voices creating a rumble like distant thunder. Elowen stood with Corinne in the section reserved for honored guests, though many of the nearby wolves eyed her with suspicion and hostility. She tried to ignore them, focusing instead on the arena floor where Draeven and Gareth faced each other. Gareth was exactly as Corinne had described him. Massive even by wolf standards, with a coat so dark it seemed to absorb light. His eyes were yellow, cold and calculating, and when he smiled, his teeth were like knives. He carried himself with the absolute confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. First trial, Elder Blackmane's voice boomed across the arena. Combat. The rules are simple. Fight until one yields or cannot continue. Death is permitted but not required. Begin. Gareth didn't wait for Draeven to ready himself. He charged immediately, shifting mid-stride from human to full wolf form, a blur of dark fur and snapping teeth. The crowd roared its approval at the aggressive opening. But Draeven wasn't there. He had shifted as well, but instead of meeting Gareth's charge, he had moved sideways, using the larger wolf's momentum against him. Gareth's teeth snapped on empty air, and Draeven's claws raked across his flank, drawing first blood. The fight that followed was brutal and beautiful in equal measure. Gareth had youth and strength on his side, his attacks powerful enough to crack stone. But Draeven had experience and cunning, turning the arena itself into a weapon, using rocks and shadows to his advantage. They fought for nearly an hour, two titans locked in a struggle that seemed to shake the very mountains. Blood stained the arena floor. Both wolves bore wounds that would have killed lesser creatures. The crowd was on its feet, howling encouragement to one side or the other. And then, just when it seemed Gareth's youth would win out, Draeven did something unexpected. He stopped fighting. He shifted back to human form, standing bloodied and exhausted in the center of the arena, and raised one hand in a gesture of peace. "I yield the combat trial," he announced, his voice carrying despite his obvious pain. "Gareth has proven himself the stronger fighter. But strength alone does not make a king." The crowd erupted in confusion. Some cheered Gareth's victory. Others booed Draeven's surrender. But the Alpha King simply stood there, calm and dignified, waiting for the chaos to subside. "He's lost," Corinne whispered desperately. "He needed to win at least 2 of the 3 trials." "Wait," Elowen said, her eyes on Draeven. "He has a plan. I can see it." Gareth, still in wolf form, circled Draeven suspiciously. He had expected this to end with Draeven's death or complete submission. This calculated surrender confused him, threw off his rhythm. The second trial, Elder Blackmane announced once order was restored. Wisdom. Each challenger will be presented with a problem facing our people. They will have 1 hour to propose a solution. The council will judge which solution is wiser. A young wolf was brought forward, thin and trembling. "This is Mira," Elder Blackmane explained. "She comes from a small pack in the Southern Territories. Her lands are poor, the hunting scarce. Her people are starving. Both Draeven and Gareth will tell us how they would address this crisis. Gareth, as the winner of the first trial, you may speak first." Gareth shifted back to human form, though he kept his posture aggressive, dominant. "The solution is obvious," he said. "Myra's pack is weak. They occupy land they cannot sustain. They should be absorbed into a stronger pack, their territory given to those who can use it properly. The weak have no place in wolf society. We are predators, and predators must be strong or die." A rumble of approval came from the traditionalist sections of the crowd. It was a harsh solution, but it aligned with ancient wolf values. Survival of the fittest. Strength above all. "Draeven?" Elder Blackmane prompted. The Alpha King was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. When he spoke, his words were careful, measured. "Myra's pack is struggling because the Great Drought 3 years ago changed the migration patterns of their primary prey. Through no fault of their own, their traditional hunting grounds became barren. Gareth's solution would punish them for bad luck, not bad leadership." He turned to address the council directly. "I propose instead that we implement a resource-sharing system. Packs with surplus game share with those experiencing shortage. In return, struggling packs provide labor, skills, and knowledge. Myra's pack are skilled craftsmen and healers. Their knowledge has value beyond their hunting prowess. By supporting them through this difficult time, we strengthen the entire wolf nation, not just the strong packs." The crowd was quieter now, considering. This was a radically different approach, one that prioritized cooperation over competition. Furthermore, Draeven continued, "If we simply absorb every struggling pack, we lose diversity. We lose the unique skills and perspectives that each pack brings. A nation of only the strong is brittle, easily broken. A nation that supports its weak becomes resilient, adaptable." Elder Blackmane conferred quietly with the other council members. The debate seemed heated, with elders taking strong positions on both sides. Finally, they reached a consensus. "The council finds merit in both solutions," Elder Blackmane announced. "Gareth's approach is traditional and proven. Draeven's approach is innovative and compassionate. However, we live in changing times, and innovation may serve us better than tradition." The second trial goes to Draeven. Now it was 1 trial each. Everything would come down to the third and final test. The final trial, Elder Blackmane said, and his voice carried the weight of centuries. Vision. Each challenger will present their vision for the future of the Wolf Nation. They will tell us where they believe we should go, what we should become. The Council and the gathered packs will vote. Majority rules. This was it. The moment everything had been building toward. Elowen felt her heart racing as Gareth stepped forward, his presence commanding every eye in the arena. My vision is simple, Gareth began, his voice like rolling thunder. We return to the old ways. The ways that made us great, that made us feared and respected. We expand our territories, claim what is rightfully ours by ancient treaty. We remind the humans why they once cowered in their villages when the moon was full. We become again what we were always meant to be, the apex predators of this world. The traditionalist sections of the crowd erupted in howls of approval. It was a vision that appealed to pride, to nostalgia, to the deep-seated belief that wolves were superior to all other creatures. We have been too soft, Gareth continued. Too willing to compromise, to accommodate, to make peace with those weaker than ourselves. Draeven's retreat from the Eastern Valley was not wisdom. It was cowardice. And if we continue down his path, we will become weak ourselves. Soft. Domesticated. No better than the dogs that serve human masters. More howls, louder now. Elowen felt Corin tense beside her, his hands clenched into fists. But under my leadership, Gareth concluded, we will reclaim our birthright. We will expand until every territory bows before us. We will be what our ancestors were, conquerors. Kings of the wild. This is my vision, and this is what I will deliver. The applause was deafening. Even some of the moderate packs seemed swayed by Gareth's passionate words, by the promise of glory and power. Draeven stood and walked to the center of the arena. He looked small compared to Gareth, older and more worn. But when he spoke, his voice carried a quiet strength that demanded attention. My vision, he began, is not of the past, but of the future. Not of conquest, but of survival. Because that is what we are truly talking about here. Not glory or pride or reclaiming ancient rights. We are talking about whether the Wolf Nation will exist 100 years from now. He let that sink in, his eyes scanning the crowd. The world is changing faster than it ever has before. Humans are building cities that dwarf our largest settlements. They are developing technologies we cannot match with magic alone. They are forming alliances, creating trade networks, advancing in ways that will soon leave us behind if we cling only to the old ways. Weakness, someone shouted from the crowd. But Draeven continued, undeterred. Gareth speaks of returning to what we were. But what were we? Small packs, constantly fighting each other over territory and resources. It took the threat of human expansion to unite us into a nation at all. And now Gareth wants to start another war, one that will consume resources, lives, and time we cannot afford to waste. Draeven's voice grew stronger, more passionate. My vision is of a wolf nation that is strong enough to adapt. That can maintain our traditions while also learning from others. That can trade with humans instead of fighting them, learn from their innovations while teaching them to respect the natural world we protect. I envision a future where our children don't have to choose between being warriors and being scholars, where strength is measured not just in combat but in wisdom, creativity, resilience. He paused, and when he spoke again, his words were softer but somehow more powerful. Gareth promises you glory. I promise you survival. He promises you conquest. I promise you a future. And I ask you, all of you gathered here, which vision is truly stronger? The one that looks backward to a past that can never return? Or the one that looks forward to a future we can build together? The arena fell silent. It was not the roaring approval that had greeted Gareth, but something deeper. A thoughtful quiet, the sound of minds changing, of old beliefs being questioned. The vote will be by pack, Elder Blackmane announced. Each pack leader will cast their vote for the vision they believe in. All in favor of Gareth's vision, show your mark. Pack leaders began to step forward, placing stones on the ancient voting platform. Elowen counted silently, her stomach tight with anxiety. The traditionalist packs voted for Gareth almost unanimously. The moderate packs were split, some swayed by promises of glory, others by fears of war. All in favor of Draeven's vision, show your mark. More pack leaders stepped forward. The pile of stones grew, slowly approaching the height of Gareth's pile. It was going to be close, impossibly close. When the last stone was placed, Elder Blackmane counted carefully, his expression neutral. The entire arena seemed to hold its breath. By a margin of 3 votes, he finally announced, the packs have chosen Draeven's vision. The challenge is concluded. Draeven remains Alpha King. The arena exploded in a mixture of cheers and angry howls. Gareth stood frozen, his expression twisted with rage and disbelief. For a moment, Elowen thought he might attack Draeven anyway, challenge or no challenge. But Draeven met his gaze calmly, and something in the Alpha King's eyes made even Gareth back down. The council has spoken, Draeven said, his voice carrying across the arena. We move forward together. Not into the past, but into the future. And anyone who cannot accept this is free to leave. But if you stay, you follow my leadership. Is that understood? Slowly, reluctantly, even the traditionalist packs bowed their heads in acknowledgement. The challenge was over. Draeven had won. But as Elowen watched Gareth slink away into the crowd, his eyes burning with hatred, she knew this wasn't really the end. It was just the beginning of something new, something that would test them all in ways they couldn't yet imagine. 6 months after the challenge, Elowen found herself standing in a place she never imagined she would be, the Alpha King's council chamber, seated at a table with wolf pack leaders from across the northern territories. Corinne sat beside her, now officially appointed as liaison to human settlements, a position that had never existed before Draeven created it. The trade agreements with the eastern villages are progressing well, Corinne was saying, pointing to a map spread across the table. 3 more settlements have agreed to exchange grain and metalwork for magical healing services and protection from wild animals. Not all of my wolves are happy about this, growled a pack leader named Fenrith, his gray fur bristling. They feel like we're becoming servants to humans. We're becoming partners, Draeven corrected firmly. There's a difference. We offer what we have in abundance in exchange for what we lack. It's logical. It's unprecedented, another pack leader muttered. Most worthwhile things are, Elowen interjected. All eyes turned to her, and she fought down the nervousness that still came from being the only human in a room full of wolves. 6 months ago, my people were preparing to be destroyed. Now we're trading freely with wolf packs, and both sides are benefiting. Children from my village no longer grow up fearing wolves. Wolf pups are learning that humans can be something other than prey or enemy. Small steps, Fenrith admitted grudgingly. But what about Gareth's followers? They're still out there, still angry. There have been 3 attacks on human settlements in the past month alone. Which we've investigated and punished, Draeven said firmly. Gareth himself is in exile, stripped of his rank and his pack. His followers know that violence will not be tolerated. But yes, there are still those who resist change. There always will be. Our job is to prove that the new way works better than the old. The council meeting continued for another hour, discussing everything from border disputes to resource allocation to the possibility of establishing a formal school where wolf and human children could learn together. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure, this work of building something entirely new from the ashes of ancient hatred. When the meeting finally ended, Elowen walked with Corinne through the streets of the northern capital. It was market day, and the streets were filled with both wolves and humans now, trading goods and stories. A human merchant was selling spices to a wolf craftsman. A wolf healer was treating a human child's broken arm. Small moments of cooperation that would have been impossible just months ago. We're actually doing it, Corinne said wonderingly. Building something new. We're trying, Elowen corrected. It's fragile. One major incident could shatter everything we've built. Then we'll rebuild, Corinne said with the optimism that Elowen had come to both love and find exasperation about him. We've come too far to give up now. They made their way to the cliff overlook where Draeven often came to think. They found him there, staring out at the mountains in the distance, his expression peaceful. Alpha King, Corinne said respectfully. We didn't mean to disturb you. You're not, Draeven said, gesturing for them to join him. I was just thinking about that day 6 months ago, when Elowen stood on a cliff much like this one and changed everything. I didn't change everything, Elowen protested. I just made a desperate threat. You showed me that courage comes in many forms, Draeven said. That wisdom is sometimes more powerful than strength. That the future is worth fighting for even when the past seems safer. He turned to look at them both. You know, I've been Alpha King for 30 years. I've won more battles than I can count, survived challenges that should have killed me. But I think the greatest thing I've ever done is choose to retreat from a single human woman with a vial of poison. It wasn't exactly a retreat, Elowen said with a slight smile. More of a strategic repositioning. Draeven laughed, the sound carrying across the mountains. Call it what you will. It was the right choice. And now we have a chance to build something that will outlast us both. A future where our peoples don't just coexist but actually thrive together. It won't be easy, Corinne warned. There are still those like Gareth who will fight against every change. Nothing worthwhile is easy, Draeven said, echoing Elowen's earlier words. But we don't have to do it alone. We have each other. We have the moderate packs who see the wisdom in this new path. We have young wolves like you, Corinne, who are brave enough to question tradition. And we have humans like Elowen who are willing to stand up for what they believe in, even against impossible odds. A comfortable silence fell over them as they stood watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. In the valley below, the northern capital was lighting its evening lanterns, a constellation of warm light against the gathering dark. I need to return to my village soon, Elowen said eventually. Kasha has been managing things in my absence, but I've been away too long. My people need to see that I'm still one of them, that I haven't been corrupted by living among wolves. Corrupted? Corinne said with mock offense. I'll have you know we're very good influences. You eat raw meat and howl at the moon, Elowen teased. And you have no sense of smell and can't even grow a decent coat of fur, Corinne shot back. I'd say we're even. Draeven watched their banter with amusement. Before you go, Elowen, I have something for you. He reached into his robes and pulled out a small object wrapped in soft leather. Open it. Elowen unwrapped the leather to reveal a pendant carved from moonstone, intricate and beautiful. It depicted a human and a wolf standing back to back, facing outward together. It's the symbol of unity, Draeven explained. Something I had commissioned. I want you to wear it, not just as a pretty ornament, but as a reminder. You and I, humans and wolves, were stronger together than we ever could be apart. Elowen felt tears prick her eyes as she fastened the pendant around her neck. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Draeven replied. For having the courage to threaten an Alpha King. For believing that peace was possible even when it seemed impossible. For being willing to risk everything for people you'd never met. A messenger wolf appeared at the edge of the overlook, breathing hard from running. Alpha King, he panted. News from the Southern Territories. There's been an incident. Draeven's expression immediately became serious. What kind of incident? A human settlement was attacked. Not by wolves, but by bandits. The human leaders are requesting wolf assistance to track down the criminals. A slow smile spread across Draeven's face. 6 months ago, humans would never have asked us for help. They would have assumed we were involved. This is progress. He turned to Corinne. Assemble a tracking team. Take your best scouts. And Corinne, make sure some humans accompany them. Let this be a joint effort. Yes, Alpha King, Corinne said, already heading toward the stairs. And that, Draeven said to Elowen once they were alone again, is how we build trust. One incident at a time. One cooperation at a time. It's slow, often frustrating, and there will be setbacks. But it's the only way forward. Elowen nodded, understanding. I should get back to my village. Help them understand what we're building here. Go with my blessing, Draeven said. And know that you will always have a place here in the northern capital. You are not just a liaison or an ambassador. You are a friend. To me, to Corinne, to all wolves who believe in the future we're creating. The journey back to Elowen's village took 3 days. Corinne accompanied her for the first day, then had to turn back to lead the tracking mission in the Southern Territories. She made the rest of the journey alone, moving through forests that no longer seemed quite so threatening, past wolf territories where she was recognized and given safe passage. When she finally crested the hill overlooking her village, her heart swelled with emotion. There it was, her home, exactly as she'd left it. Smoke rising from chimneys, children playing in the streets, the sound of the blacksmith's hammer ringing through the air. But there was something different too. At the edge of the village, she could see new structures being built. A trading post, perhaps, or a meeting hall. And working alongside the human builders were several wolves in human form, helping to raise beams and lay stone. Kasha spotted her first, running up the hill with tears streaming down her face. They embraced, laughing and crying together. You're back, Kasha said. I was so worried. We heard rumors of the challenge, of what happened. Some said Draeven won, others said Gareth. No one knew what to believe. Draeven won, Elowen confirmed. And more than that, Kasha, I think we've actually started something remarkable. Something that might change everything. I can see that, Kasha said, gesturing toward the wolves working at the village edge. They arrived 2 weeks ago, offered to help with construction in exchange for learning human building techniques. The elders were skeptical, but I convinced them to give it a chance. It's been going well. They walked down into the village together, and everywhere Elowen looked, she saw small signs of change. Wolves and humans working side by side. Children who showed curiosity rather than fear. A future slowly taking shape from the impossible choice she'd made 6 months ago on a clifftop. That evening, the village held a feast to celebrate her return. The wolves working on the construction were invited, and though there was initial awkwardness, by the end of the night, humans and wolves were sharing food and stories, laughing at each other's jokes, finding common ground in the universal experiences of family, work, and hope for the future. As Elowen sat watching this impossible scene unfold, she felt the weight she'd been carrying for 6 months finally begin to lift. They had done it. Not perfectly, not completely, but they had begun. They had taken the first steps toward a future where an ultimatum on a clifftop would seem like ancient history, a relic of a darker time when fear ruled and cooperation seemed impossible. Kasha settled beside her, 2 cups of wine in her hands. "Tell me honestly," she said. "Was it worth it? The risk, the terror, the possibility that you might start a war instead of preventing one?" Elowen thought about that for a long moment, looking around at the mixed crowd of humans and wolves, at the children playing together without understanding how revolutionary their friendship was, at the symbol of unity hanging around her neck. "Yes," she finally said. "It was worth it. Every terrifying moment, every sleepless night, every time I thought I might have doomed us all. Because this, right here, this is what I was fighting for. Not just survival, but the possibility of something better." "And the poison?" Kasha asked quietly. "The tears of Fenrith?" Elowen touched her satchel, where 2 vials still remained hidden. "I still have them. And I'll keep them, as a reminder of how close we came to destroying everything. But also as a promise. If anyone, wolf or human, threatens this peace we're building, I'll do whatever I have to do to protect it." "Even threaten another Alpha King?" Kasha asked with a slight smile. "Even that," Elowen confirmed. "Though I hope it never comes to that again. Once in a lifetime is quite enough." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the party continue around them. The future was far from certain. There would be more challenges, more conflicts, more moments when the fragile peace they'd built seemed ready to shatter. Gareth was still out there somewhere, nursing his hatred, gathering followers who believed in the old ways. But tonight, at least, humans and wolves were laughing together. Tonight, the future seemed bright with possibility. And sometimes, Elowen thought, that's enough. That's all anyone can ask for. Not certainty, not guarantees, but hope. The hope that courage and wisdom can triumph over fear and hatred. The hope that different peoples can find common ground. The hope that one person, standing on a cliff with nothing but determination and a vial of poison, can change the course of history. She raised her cup in a silent toast to that hope, to the impossible choice she'd made, to the Alpha King who'd had the wisdom to retreat, and to the future they were all building together, one small act of courage at a time. And somewhere in the mountains, a silver wolf watched the village lights and smiled, knowing that 60 seconds on a clifftop had given them all something more precious than victory. It had given them a chance. And sometimes, a chance is all anyone needs to change the world.